All right, everybody. Celtics bounce back tonight. A comeback victory to take down the New Orleans Pelicans at the TD Garden. Your boy Will Weir's here. We got the coach Greg Badakis. We're going to get into it here on Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another Celtics post-game edition of Green with Envy. As always, is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me tonight to break it all down, we have my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. Greg, not gonna lie, man, I started going through the narratives in my head at one point about what we were going to talk about and what how the game was playing out. I'm really happy that that things turned around and we're not talking about where I thought this conversation was going to go tonight.
This was actually a really interesting game because the game started out very similarly to how the Clippers game started out. Shots not falling, getting good looks, but when threes aren't falling for the team, the energy's down. They're not making the extra pass. They tend to rely on that 3-point shot a little bit too much. And in the first quarter, it was actually kind of interesting because they were attacking the paint early, and then they started settling when the shots weren't falling. And I was wondering, because in the Clippers game, when I watched it back, there were a couple moments where I felt like the Celtics could have made a comeback and the shots just never fell. They never made the big play on defense. And tonight we started to make some of those plays. Third quarter, Jaylen Brown really went to another level just with his hustle, dove on the floor for a loose ball. He had 11 rebounds in this game. He was all over the place in that third quarter to initially kind of bring us back into the game before the Pelicans then went up again, and then we had to come back in the fourth quarter. But that third quarter, I think, was huge for the Celtics, being down 10 at halftime to, cut into that lead. I think they ended up going to the fourth down 6.
Yeah, it ended up being 6, and that was kind of the interesting part where I look back in this game. This game had so many little games within it, right? Where it almost felt like we just watched 3 different games that kind of played out over time. Because even in that third quarter alone, it felt like there were 3 versions of it where there was Zion who was finding a way to get to the basket somehow, some way, and finishing everything. Then it felt like the Celtics, like you said, kind of led with Jaylen, got a little bit gritty, and then even took the lead on a Sam Hauser 3 and then a dunk. And it felt like, all right, the momentum's here. We're back. And then the Pelicans grabbed it right back and then got to that 6-point lead. So a really interesting game from a flow perspective. But let's hop into a morning box score here, because I think this is going to be a fun game for us to talk about. So let's go ahead and let's queue up a morning box score. Celtics take down the New Orleans Pelicans in a comeback victory. A very, very exciting game at the TD Garden, 118-112. Let's start out with the Pelicans here, and let's go to their dynamic duo. So let's start with Brandon Ingram, 12 of 24 from the field for him tonight. He had 28 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. I do want to talk about Brandon Ingram. I think has to be considered one of the best tough shot makers. He made some pretty absurd shots throughout this game, but we can talk more about that as we get into it. Zion Williamson, who I mentioned in the third quarter, was pretty electric with what he put on at the beginning of that quarter, that display. He was 11 of 18 from the field, 26 points, only 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals for him. 16 points for CJ McCollum, who was 7 of 14 from the field, and 15 points from Trey Murphy, 3 of 10 from three-point land. And let's go to the Celtics here. The Celtics had a stat sheet that is just full from just about everybody that played tonight. A lot going on here. Let's start with the Jays, as we usually do. Jaylen Brown, 8 of 15, 5 of 7 from the free throw line. He finishes with 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists. Jason Tatum, 10 of 18 from the field, 6 of 7 from the charity stripe, 28 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, and a block for good measure. Derrick White, the hero that we needed in the fourth quarter, really stepped up with 13 of his 17 points coming in that fourth quarter, 4 of 10 from 3, 3 of 3 in that fourth quarter alone. Drew Holiday, 7 of 11 from the field, 3 of 5, from downtown, 20 points on the night for him, and then 11 really big and crucial points from Sam Hauser off the bench, who was 3 of 7 from the 3-point line. The Celtics have 27 assists tonight on 43 made shots, I should say. And Greg, like I said, I think the story of this was just all the ebbs and flows. And, aside from how we nearly, good God, nearly threw the ball away quite literally to end that game. This was a really gritty win that I think you stated pretty perfectly. Felt like it could have gone the way of the Clippers game, and I think it was really important for them to kind of get their head back on straight and then find a way to get this job done. And I'm actually really impressed with the effort from the Celtics tonight.
Yeah, and I think we should talk about Derrick White really turning things around in that fourth quarter. As you said, he had 14 of his 18 points, a couple
13 of
threes.
17, yeah.
Okay, 13 of 17. A couple threes in that fourth quarter. There's that one play where Jaylen Brown had Dyson Daniels isolated on the right wing, and Dyson Daniels initially stonewalled him. Jaylen passed the ball out and then called for the ball back. And then when that moment happened, I was like, oh God, Jaylen, I don't know if Dyson Daniels is the guy that you want to try to take into the post. He had already had a couple steals. He had one on Jaylen, one on Tatum. They call those blocks when you strip the guy, but those were steals. Everybody knows those were steals. And he took him into the post, takes two dribbles with his left hand, double team comes. I don't know why they doubled, but it did. Kicked it out to Derrick White, and then he hit that shot. And from that moment on, Derrick White was money. The rest of that game, he was cooking. I put it into our Celtics blog Slack. I was like, this team, when D White is cooking, the team flows. He's really that, like him and KP, when they're hitting shots, that's like the secret sauce to this offense, really unlocking things. Because when he's not making shots, like we rely on those momentum shots from Derrick White. Sam Hauser had a few of them in this game, but Derrick White is the guy in the starting lineup that tends to hit those ball movement threes. And, I was really happy to see him kind of break out of that slump in the fourth quarter and rediscover some of that magic that he had a month ago.
Yeah, it was good to see Sam Hauser have a really meaningful impact in this game. I think it's been a little bit that he had. Not that he hadn't had impact, but he was really, really important in that third quarter for the Celtics. But to the Derrick White point, I think back to, first of all, we recorded a podcast this morning where we kind of highlighted that his shooting has come back down to earth, and it's kind of, hurt his all-star case, right? The fact that he's kind of come back down. And then tonight, as I was watching the game, there were so many shots in that first half. And I think really emblematic of it was that shot right before the end of the half where he had a shot in the corner where he was wide open that I believe it was from Tatum driving downhill, got two on him, kicked it to him wide open to end the half. Would have been kind of a momentum boost to go in, and it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. But end of the night, he got it going. You saw the first three he hit, throws his hands up in the air, like, oh my God, finally. Like he was taking all the same shots that he was making. He was taking the same shots. He was still making, because he's Derrick White. He makes the right play, 90% of the time, 95% of the time. So he was still taking, they just weren't going down in that same way. But to your point, then once they started going in, all of a sudden, even without KP, this felt like this is the Celtics team that, where we feel like, hey, we can sustain a blow to one of our major pieces. Because look at what's around us right now. Look at this depth. Look at this talent. But it is really starting to feel like, to the point you're making, that with KP and Derrick White, they are really kind of the guys that make this go. Other than those nights where you're going to get the Jays going for 35 each or something, right? Those are kind of nights that you can get away with other stuff, and that's the luxury of having two, a superstar and a high level all-star, right? That's the luxury of that. But on a night-to-night basis, it does feel like kind of Derrick White and Kristaps Porzingis are what direct how this offense is going to flow, and in turn, that sometimes plays over to the defense, like Scala talked about in the Clippers game, and then for parts of tonight as well.
Yeah, and as you said, it all starts with the Jays, right? Because when Derrick White is asked to do like a little bit, like Derrick White can't ISO. Derrick White's not an ISO basketball player. He plays advantage basketball. So he's always waiting to get the slight angle on you, or to get, room off a pick and roll, or to get out in transition and play in space. Derrick White's not someone you can just throw the ball to and say, take us home. So like most of the
he
stuff
might have CJ McCollum on, but you're not just gonna say, hey, go one-on-one with CJ. Like, like he might be able to make something happen, but that's not his go-to, right? That's not what he does.
Yeah, I mean, think about like Derrick White. The play that they always run for Derrick White is that little horns ghost flare, where he ends up getting the ball,
which is becoming one of my favorite plays.
Screen. Oh yeah, and that's all about creating him with a little bit of space. So somebody's chasing him and he has the angle. You have to respect that 3-point shot so that he can either go up into it, or if they come at the wrong angle, then he's going to just drive to the basket off of that and off the slot cut. So I think with White tonight, what you saw is that he played his role perfectly. He's that perfect piece to kind of balance out what the Jays have, because he's not going to command a double team. No one's ever going to double Derrick White, but they doubled Jason Tatum and they doubled Jaylen Brown, and those guys made the right passes tonight. JB ended up knocking down one of the threes off of another Tatum pass where he was getting double teamed in that fourth quarter. And this is something I just wanted to talk about because, you know, when we think back to what was the last game everybody was freaking out about, the crunch time offense?
Nuggets game.
The Nuggets game, right? So everybody's like freaking out about the crunch time offense, and they got pretty much all the same shots. You know, like even tonight when they had that fast break, Tatum pulled it out, slowed it down, and they ended up, I think that was either a White three or a JB three. But like in those moments, it's make or miss. The Celtics are getting the shots that they want most nights. And tonight they were, you know, I think they actually play better in the fourth quarter when they're playing from behind versus having a lead.
So this is something I wanted to talk about, because this is what kind of throws off some of those when you start to dig into these clutch statistics, right? Or like this game finishes a 6-point game. So one of the stats I mentioned earlier today in our podcast was that they're like 4-4 in games decided by 3 points. So this doesn't go towards that. This isn't a 5-point game, which counts as a lot of those clutch stats. And they ended up creating a gap at certain points where it was, I think it was 114 to 103 or 113 to 104 at one point. And so, you know, it's interesting and this is something I think we have to really pay attention to going forward here, is those moments where, like you said, they're coming from behind. It feels like they're almost more in control playing from behind than with a lead, right? Like if I don't really know how to describe it, but it did feel okay.
I think what it is that they don't slow the game down and get very deliberate, because they're trying to force turnovers. They're trying to get out and run. And tonight, that's what they were trying to do. They're, you know, Tatum in the fourth quarter, how many times did he try and get out in transition? You know, I was loving what I was seeing out of Tatum, just attacking the basket anytime. You know, when he goes into Pippen mode on the defensive side of the ball, where he's just all arms and he's just getting in passing lanes and then looking like the fastest guy on the court. Like Tatum is like sneaky, a crazy athlete.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't think about him that way. It's a little Paul Pierce-esque to a degree, just that you don't think of him as an athlete, but especially early Paul was like a really, really impressive athlete. Tatum's, they have very different body types, but it's similar like mindset, right? That's just not the first thing you think about when you think about them as players.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, my computer just like turned on the post game.
It messes with you in your head. It's
all of a sudden I heard Joe Mazzulla talking in my ear. I was like, we don't have connection to Joe Mazzulla. What's going on here?
Joe Mazzulla. Hold on. Is Joe Mazzulla zooming in for the rest of this podcast here? But no. So Celtics win the fourth quarter, 37-25, and also win the third quarter, 31 to 27 here. And I think that's important for them, just as much as those clutch statistics matter. It's that whole fourth quarter, right? That really encapsulates what they're able to do as a team. And something else that I didn't mention in the box where I should have. Jaylen Brown tonight, 7 assists, 0 turnovers. Just for the crowd that sometimes likes to harp on that, 0 turn. I thought Jaylen, even in the first half, I thought Jaylen was making some really excellent reads. A lot of shots weren't going in. I think he still had either 3 or 4 of his assists in the first half. But I thought Jaylen played an absolutely excellent game tonight, pretty much all the way through. And then, like you said, I think that third quarter, when it got really gritty, and I believe that was non-Tatum minutes, when it was kind of Drew and Pritchard and Sam hit those couple of shots, Jaylen out there, Ikeda, and they just, I mean, they were diving on the floor, like you said, man, and that was a big way to turn the tide, and that was something that just never came in that Clippers game, and you didn't really see them go for it in the same way, but you know, I think Mazzulla talked about this maybe pregame with Gary Washburn about kind of learning from those moments where you get humbled in those moments, but as long as you take it, like you can be pissed off, but then you got to have the focus to learn from it and then focus on your next opponent. This felt like, hey, this just happened, but it's in the past. Let's try not to repeat it. It's starting to happen. How do we fix it? And they found a way to do it. And I think rather than just letting the game, like we've seen other Celtics teams in the past where they just would have played it out and said, it is what it is. Not our night. Shots aren't going in. This team didn't do that. And I think that's really important when you look at all the different ways that these big games down the stretch are going to play out.
Yeah, they're kind of starting to remind me of like the Brad Stevens era Celtics, where they never felt out of a game, you know, just the grittiness. There was a moment tonight where I was like a little sad that we didn't have Marcus on the team, where I was like, Marcus would have definitely taken a charge at some point on Zion, and just like had like a crazy play where he just swung the energy of the game with Marcus just being Marcus. But I think JB is kind of like stepping up into that role. The way that he's calling for all the toughest matchups.
Yeah.
When
He wanted
when
Ingram when Ingram started to get going, and then towards the end, when Zion came back in for those last 4 minutes, that was JB's assignment.
Exactly. And I think, when you think about Jaylen Brown and like his continued development, I would have given him a turnover. I think he had one turnover. It would have went down as a missed field goal because they call the stupid. It pisses me off. Why do they call the strips blocks?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
so
don't know.
dumb.
That's annoying.
It's so dumb. Like, that was a turnover. So I would have given Jaylen a turnover. But anyways, I think his ability to now level up with his defensive pressure, but also hit the boards and get boards in traffic. Jaylen had some of the biggest rebounds of the game in the fourth quarter. And I think that just speaks to the way that people lead on the court. Jaylen is leading through his ability to lock down on defense and also do a little bit more of the dirty work that you hadn't seen from Jaylen in the past. And this is something I tweeted out the other day, where like not enough is made about how well conditioned Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are, because to do what they do on both ends of the court for as many minutes as they play is very difficult to do. There's a reason why most guys are either really good offensive players or really good defensive players, because it's tough to do both. You only have a limited amount of energy that you can expend during a game, and these guys have figured out a way to put themselves in the position to be in peak physical condition throughout every game and play both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that's a great point. 'Cause I mean, that's what you hear with like a guy like Luka, right? Like, well, he's so bad on defense, but look at how much he expends on offense. But it's not as if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum aren't doing a ton on offense.
I mean, how many screens is Tatum setting a game these days, man? He's taking so much physical contact, and then his ability. I mean, he was
The game
guarding
was physical
Valanciunas at
tonight, by the
times.
way. This was a pretty
Very
physical
physical.
game tonight with Jonas in there and Zion. I thought something that was actually really key was in the second quarter. The Celtics started to pick up the pace a little bit, and it really forced Willie Green to have to say, how long can I actually play Jonas and Zion at the same time? And you saw in the second half, I think Jonas finished just under 20 minutes played. He didn't play very much in that second half because the Celtics picked up the pace, and then you saw Zion had to come out as well. But when they were in there, that was a really physical game, and Zion was bringing it to everybody. If you were guarding Zion, we called him. I think I called him Vibranium. He was like the Black Panther with the Vibranium suit. That you try to Drew Holiday tried to get in there and give it to him. Bounced off a couple times. The one where JB went like 5 feet over to the right in the first quarter was pretty funny. Zion is just, man, he's such a fascinating player to watch. Like, he's completely different than what I thought he was going to be coming into the league, and yet he's still fascinating and just a marvel. Like, it's really hard to comprehend when you're watching him what it will all mean, but it's really special at times. And in that third quarter, especially the beginning, I was like, oh man, Zion might just be having a night that he's going to come take it over. But to your point, circling this all back to being in shape, you got to be able to do it all the way through, and that is something that's really special about what the Jays do on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, what'd you make of the way that the Celtics guarded Zion? This was a debate going on in the Celtics blog chat where I was talking with Keith, and he was like, "Oh, the Celtics aren't they're letting Zion get to his left hand. Like, the only reason he wants to go right is to come back left, and they're not like playing him the way you're supposed to play Zion." And I was like, "Man, like, a lot easier said than done, my guy." Like,
Yeah.
the Celtics are trying to stay on that high side, but anytime they stayed, forcing him to his right hand, anytime they forced him to his right hand, though, he just immediately took up that space, got people on his hip, and got to the basket. You know what I mean? And like, it's one thing to have a scouting report on somebody. It's another thing to actually feel the physical presence of someone when they hit you in the chest. And I think when the Celtics started to feel Zion just like going full speed in their chest, then you have to brace for the contact. And the moment you have to brace for the contact, you become just a little a step slower because you're in the mud trying to really plant your foot to take that hit and embrace the contact. And there was that one play like when Jaylen had him in the fourth, where Zion ended up like going that D Wade like motorcycle angle that that our guy Raul used to talk
Yeah.
about. And Jalen tried to get to his left. He tried to take away the left and force him right. And Zion just put his shoulder down, and he's just so freaking strong. There's just really nobody on the Celtics kind of built in a lab to guard Zion. I mean,
There's
you
not
don't
many
have
people in the league built to guard Zion. Like, you
right.
know what I mean? Like, I would assume Giannis might be the guy, but like,
Mhm.
like there's not many Giannis's running around out there that are gonna be able to take that task. And to your point, like he creates space in a way that's just so unique because he's so strong. Because that's the part of him that I think did translate from what we first thought Zion was going to be. Like it felt like this is going to be Shaq with Charles Barkley's body. It's kind of like what we saw, and we thought he might just dunk on everybody, and he doesn't dunk. He doesn't dunk anymore. The guy came in as like we thought he was going to be the best, maybe best in-game dunker since Blake Griffin or something like that. And through injuries and whatever else, it just hasn't been the case. But that dude still just finds a way to get into the lane. And because he's so strong and he does a really good job of kind of keeping the ball away from the defenders, even when you send that double, he does a really good job of keeping it away just enough so that he can put his body into you and then create his own space. And then he just needs a little bit of room and he can really kind of sneak that ball. And he's still got a little bit of that burst quickness to like get through a little gap that you give him. And if he has enough to even get, a little bit of one of his shoulders in, good luck. Right. Like, and then, like you said, if you're on the outside and he's like coming downhill, Scal talked about this too. You go hip to hip, it's just over.
Yeah.
There's no catching up to that. You're not coming to block that from behind. You're going to bounce off his body like vibranium. Like, so I don't really have an objection to how the Celtics handled that. I thought Zion made some incredibly tough shots when he was going off. And this is why when people talk about what do the Pelicans do, it's like, how can you trade a guy that just did that? Like you just saw what he did for, 9 to 11 straight points, whatever it was in that third quarter. He's getting amped up. And I'm like, dude, who else can do that in the league? Like I said, once again, probably maybe Giannis. Like that's about it.
It's just limited energy for that guy, though, man. He can do it in these
A
short
little bit
bursts.
Embiid. It's the Embiid factor, like how Embiid kind of
Right.
has tired out with us in the past.
Yeah, and I think with Zion, he definitely looks in better shape than he did when everybody was calling him fat during the in-season tournament, right? I think he looks significantly slimmer than he did at that point in the season. He looks like he has more energy. Maybe that was just being in Vegas and Zion. So maybe Zion was just out at the club. Maybe a little spearmint rhino and Zion's
James Harden flew out. They had a night.
Spearmint Zion, yeah. But I think coming back to the Jays and what we have with the Celtics this year, there are going to be games like with the Clippers where the shots don't fall, and then the other team has these amazing players like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, who looks great, by the way. James Harden does look really good this year. And so those games happen, you know what I mean? Is how do you bounce back? And this is what we talked about on the pod this morning with Adam, is like in the playoffs, it's going to be about how you adjust to the next game. And the fact that the Celtics haven't lost back-to-back games, since like early November this year?
Something like that.
Yeah, I think that was the stat. And I think they're now 10-1 in games where
coming off a loss,
something like that, where they have 11 losses. That's what they're at.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're
10-1, 8-0 at home, coming off a loss.
Yeah. So like that's what fans should be looking at. It's not the games where they really struggle. It's the game after they really struggle. Because that's what it's going to come down to in the playoffs is how do you respond? Think about last year against the Miami Heat. We went down 3-0 because we didn't bounce back. And we just assumed we were going to get them because we were the more talented team. We didn't come out and actually execute. And I think that's what I'm seeing different about this team this year. Is they recognize the urgency and guys are really sliding into their roles. To your point about Sam Hauser, he had an unbelievable game tonight. And the fact that the guys now recognize that they need to weaponize Sam Hauser. This is something we've been talking about, weaponize Hauser. And everybody's looking for Sam when he's on the court now. And I think that's a real big difference between last year's team and this year's team. The moment Sam's on the court, they're looking for him and Sam's looking to shoot.
Yeah, not letting that negative momentum, continue, right? Finding a way to put a stop to it, instead of so you don't end up going, it's only one game. Well, now it's 2 games, and then it's 3 games, and then you're too deep of a hole and you can't climb out. So, good win for the Celtics tonight, 118 to 112. Like I said, for the Pelicans, Zion was great. Ingram, I was amazed that Ingram hit some of the shots that he did. Like it was really good defense, and he just made some incredible shots. But that was just really that was impressive. But it was still 12 of 24, 28 points. Not enough. Celtics get the win, 118-112, and that sets them up for another game tomorrow night. So this is another back-to-back at home. Pacers come to town. Looks like Tyrese Halliburton is going to play. So this will only be the second game that the Pacers have had Halliburton and Siakam together. Any quick thoughts you have on this game here, Greg? Is this is going to be a bit of a new look Pacers that we're going to see from the last time? Is actually the last time the Celtics and Pacers linked up was when Tyrese Halliburton got his injury and then became the TJ McConnell game in the second half, which then turned into the Buddy Hield slap in the head game, and we know how that all went.
Well, I think, first of all, for everyone that's tuning in, we will not be doing a post-game live tomorrow. Will and I play on a men's league team. We've talked about it on the pod before, but we have a game at 9:30 Central Time tomorrow, 10:30 Eastern. We're going to be hooping.
West Coast start time.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. But, I talked about this on the pod earlier today, man. Like, the Pacers, when you watch them play, it just all comes down to, like, is Aaron Nesmith going to hurt somebody? And, like, that's all I can think about is when we play the Pacers now is, like, how many times am I going to scream at Nesmith for crashing into somebody? All the stuff that I used to love about Nesmith, now I hate him for it, which is cool. It means that he's really carving out a lane. But I think, it's an important game for the Celtics, but I'm not really going to put much stock in it because the Pacers are trying to get used to playing with Halliburton and Siakam. They have such a great system. It seems like it's very plug and play. Like even when Halliburton's out, they still score 130 points. So we'll see. I think the Celtics, hopefully Porzingis is back tomorrow. I think he's a key kind of unlocking things against the Pacers. And I'm excited to see the Celtics go up against Pacers because we're probably going to see them in the playoffs, man.
Yeah, it's a good playoff preview, and I think to your point, a lot of it's going to be determined if Kristaps Porzingis comes back for this game or not. I would assume Al Horford's probably not going to play. So if you got no Al and you got no KP, you're basically left with Nemi, and you're going to see a lot of small ball five, maybe some O'Shea Brissett, maybe a sprinkle of Lamar Stevens at some point. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But I think it should be a fun game either way. Like you said, Nesmith is, keep your eye on the Tasmanian Devil known as Aaron Nesmith. That will be interesting seeing how pumped up he gets now that the Pacers are, a playoff team coming into the Garden.
Well, it'll be nice to play them at the Garden, right? We haven't played them at the Garden since we beat them by 50 points.
Yeah, that's true. We keep ending up there because the extra game from the in-season tournament was in Indiana. So, yeah, that makes sense. So it'll be interesting to be back at the Garden, see how that goes. Like Greg said, there won't be a post-game recap for that. But if you do want to check out how the Green with Envy men's league team does, make sure you go follow us on Instagram. I'll post the score after the game. So make sure that you are following at Green Envy Pod on Instagram. Or you can always just follow us across all of our social medias, which you should be doing at Green Envy Pod on Twitter as well if you're listening to this. But that's going to do it for this episode, this game recap here. Celtics again, 118-112. Gritty comeback victory at the TD Garden. I'm your boy, Will Weir. This is Greg Menakis. We're calling it a night. We will see you guys later this week. Peace.
Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor. You know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain.